Whilst most footballers possess a wide range of attributes, there are some who really excel in just one area. For the likes of Filippo Inzaghi or Gary Lineker, that was scoring tap-ins. By contrast, Kevin Davies and Emil Heskey only averaged a goal about once every 5 games, but were brilliant target men and experts at leading a line and bringing others into the game. Charlie Adam was a fairly unremarkable central midfielder, aside from his superb set pieces, and Sebastian Larsson would have been similarly forgettable were it not for his mastery in dead ball situations. These are all examples of footballers who were brilliant at one thing, but that thing, i.e. scoring goals or being an effective target man as a forward, or being very good at free kicks as a midfielder, isn't particularly rare or unusual. I saw this tweet the other day from Maiwa Obiagu pop up on my timeline, in which he asked the question, aside from Rory Delap's throw-ins and Chris Brunt's corners, which other random players in football history had a weird attribute or skill that made them well known? And in what can only be described as a brazen act of theft, I decided to give it some thought and make it a video all of my own. In recognition of my sins, I won't be including either Rory Delap's throw-ins or Chris Brunt's corners, as remarkable as they were, nor will I be including Seb Larsson or Charlie Adam set pieces. And there will be a whole raft of honourable mentions towards the end. Without further ado then, here are 7 footballers who are renowned or famous for having just one remarkable or unusual skill or attribute. 7th, Alireza Bevand. A man who can throw a football further than most keepers can kick it, Alireza Bevand is a freak of nature. Whilst traditionally goalkeepers were renowned primarily for their reflexes and their handling, far greater importance has been placed upon their footwork and distribution in recent years. Alireza Bevand isn't remarkable for any of the above though. His reflexes are decent but not outstanding, and his kicking is actually well below par. That might be because Bevand relies so heavily on his one remarkable attribute, which is the longest throw in world football, rather than his kicking. Capped 50 times by Iran since making his debut 8 years ago as a 21-year-old, Bevand grew up in a nomadic family around the Zagros Mountains, and he ran away from his home to Tehran as a teenager to fulfill his dream of becoming a professional footballer. That dream was realised with NAF Tehran in 2010, and in 2016, Bevand was signed by Persepolis, the biggest club in Iran. Not only is Bevand in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the longest throw in football, at over 60 metres, it is the pace and accuracy with which the ball flies out of his hands that is the most astonishing, and it makes his throws a particularly lethal weapon on the counter-attack. Peter Schmeichel is the first keeper that I can think of whose quick-thinking long throws became a real attacking weapon at Manchester United, but Bevand takes things to a whole new level. If you are unfamiliar with Bevand's ludicrous long-throwing abilities, go and give them a watch on YouTube once you finish watching this. I promise that you won't be disappointed. Though, you may well be left wondering how he doesn't dislocate his shoulder every time he launches the ball upfield. Following a couple of years playing in Europe where he played for Royal Antwerp and Boavista, Bevand recently returned to Persepolis on a 3-year deal. 6th, Ricardo Charisma. This feels somewhat disrespectful because Ricardo Charisma is not just some random footballer, and he ought not be renowned for only one absolutely outrageous piece of trickery that he has mastered better than anyone else. Basically the same age as Cristiano Ronaldo, I don't think that there are too many people who saw them both at Sporting Club de Portugal or in the Portugal youth teams who would claim that Ronaldo was as technically gifted or naturally blessed as the more enigmatic Charisma. Whilst both players suffered from a poor temperament, ill discipline, and were accused of being selfish at times, Ronaldo channeled his ambitions and frustrations by working harder than anyone else and becoming half man, half machine. Charisma, meanwhile, became more withdrawn from the sport, and his football suffered as a result. I think that it is also relevant that Ronaldo joined Manchester United in 2003, and came under the tutelage of Alex Ferguson, whilst Charisma joined Barcelona that same summer in a move that would prove to be very ill-judged. Charisma has still had a very good career, winning 80 caps for Portugal and playing for some of the biggest teams in Europe, but his failure to maximise his talents and become a genuine Ballon d'Or candidate, if not winner, means that he is synonymous with his box of tricks and, primarily, his ability to strike a ball with the outside of his right foot. One of the most delightful techniques in football when it is done right. I don't think that I have ever seen anyone better at it than Charisma, whether he is crossing the ball or striking on goal. There is a fantastic compilation of some of his finest outside of the foot trivellas, which is also well worth a watch, at the end of this if you are looking for a fun way to waste 10 minutes of your time. 5th, Billy Whitehurst. It's all fun and games in this 7 aside from Billy Whitehurst, whose remarkable skill was, well, giving defenders sleepless nights, and whose unusual attributes related primarily to aggression and frequently committing GBH on a football pitch. The hard man's hard man, the likes of Vinnie Jones and Neil Ruddock, have gone on record as saying that they were terrified of him, as was every opponent that he ever came up against, and indeed his own teammates in training. A brickie from just outside of Barnsley, Whitehurst turned professional with Hull City in 1980, but whilst football might have finally become a full-time job for him, there was very little that could be described as professional about the violent 21-year-old. It was relegation to the 3rd Division and the coaching of club legend Chris Chilton that turned Whitehurst from bruiser to goalscorer. Or, more accurately, bruiser and goalscorer. His fine form earned him a club record move to Newcastle United in the 1st Division in 1985, where Whitehurst came up against defenders who had never seen anything like him before and would be very grateful never to again once he eventually dropped down into the 2nd Division with Reading. An absolute head case, when Whitehurst wasn't stamping on opponents or grabbing them by the neck, he used to pass his spare time by bare-knuckle boxing in gypsy communities. I know that I am supposed to love Whitehurst as a bit of a Hull City cult hero. I am a Hull City fan for those of you who don't know, though Whitehurst did come a little bit before my time. I find it difficult to have any affection for someone who was, first and foremost, a thug. Whitehurst's approach was undoubtedly effective since what he lacked in talent, he more than made up for in chaos, particularly since most offenders didn't want to get anywhere near him. To me, that isn't really football. And I think that English football's adoration for hard men is one of the reasons why we went so long producing so few technically excellent footballers and underachieving at international tournaments. So, personally, I don't mourn their passing. 4th, Qualtamoc Blanco. Similar to Ricardo Charisma in some respects, Qualtamoc Blanco was far too good at football to be synonymous simply with one piece of skill. But unfortunately, once again, I don't make the rules. Whilst Mexicans, a fair few Americans, and the odd Real Valladolid fan will testify to Blanco's wonderful all-round technique and creativity, it is the skill move known as the Qualtameña, named in his honour, for which he is known across most of the world. Stocky, aggressive, and energetic, Blanco is widely regarded as one of Mexico's greatest ever players, having won 120 caps and scored 38 goals for the national team. And he was an MLS All-Star whilst playing for Chicago Fire in both 2008 and 2009. Blanco was already deep into his 30s when he arrived in the United States, but that wouldn't stop him from making the league's best 11 or winning the MLS Goal of the Year award. The famous Qualtameña, or the Blanco trick as it is helpfully named for ignorant non-Spanish speakers such as myself, always looked a little bit daft but was surprisingly effective. The move involved Blanco trapping the ball between both of his feet before jumping, releasing the ball, and then regaining control of it when it lands again. It proved to be particularly effective when Blanco was cornered by multiple defenders in a tight situation, and despite everyone knowing what to expect, combating it proved to be remarkably difficult. Though lesser known, Blanco's other outstanding attribute was his ability from 12 yards out. Of the 73 penalties that he ever took, Blanco converted 71 of them, a conversion rate of 97.26%, which is bettered by very few players in the entire history of the sport. Third, Kerlon. Talking of silly novelty but surprisingly effective pieces of skill performed by technically gifted Latin American footballers, without the skill move that brought Kerlon to the attention of most of the world, ironically, he might actually have become far more famous and have had far greater success within their game. Kerlon was a sensation for Brazil at under 17 level whilst contracted to Cruzeiro, and he was named as the best player at the 2005 South American Under-17 Football Championships, where he scored 8 goals in only 7 games. That prompted interest from the likes of Manchester United, Real Madrid, and, yes, just about every big European football club that you can imagine. It was Inter Milan who won the race to sign him, except they borrowed Chievo's non-EU registration quota, so Kerlon actually signed for Chievo, and neither Chievo nor Inter Milan paid Cruzeiro for his playing rights, but instead 80% of his rights were actually acquired by the late super agent Mino Raiola. Meanwhile, Cruzeiro and his Brazilian agency retained the other 20%. I know, it seems like a very healthy arrangement. The skill that Kerlon was famous for, known as the seal dribble, was so ubiquitous that even in the pre-YouTube era, it seemed as though everyone had seen it or was at least aware of it. I can actually remember my dad coming home from work one day and talking about it, and then us trying to find it on the internet. I feel about 85 years old right now, but at the time, it was rare for things to go viral and certainly not to that extent. Whilst the seal dribble was very novel to watch, it was so effective, and indeed so audacious, that many players, particularly at the senior level, responded much as Billy Whitehurst would have done by absolutely clobbering him. One Brazilian was suspended for 5 whole games for elbowing Kerlon in the head, and it has been posited that his future injury problems might have been linked to the physical onslaught that he was subjected to during his teens whilst doing the seal dribble. That is a great shame because Kerlon, at that age, was so much more than just the seal dribble. He had brilliant feet, a rare burst of acceleration, and he could hit a beautiful free kick. His time in Italy was an absolute disaster though, and following moves to Japan, America, and Malta, Kerlon retired at the age of only 29, following a short spell in Slovakia. Second, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I was a big fan of Aaron Wan-Bissaka at Crystal Palace, and I said as much on this channel. But the big question mark around him joining Manchester United, and the reason why he never won a cap for England, was in regard to his ability on the ball and his powers of creativity when he was asked to get forward more down that right flank. Despite the fact that Wan-Bissaka was a winger in youth team football, you wouldn't necessarily know that from watching him play at the elite level. What's more, it was long said that Wan-Bissaka was the best defensive right-back in the Premier League and sometimes even in the world. I think that greatly overestimates Wan-Bissaka's positioning and his awareness, and it reduces defending down to the one thing that Wan-Bissaka is actually great at, which is tackling, and particularly slide tackling. In one-on-one situations, either side-on or with his back to goal, it is true that Wan-Bissaka is very difficult to beat, and even when players do manage to initially get past him, his powers of recovery on the slide are very impressive. Over the past 5 years, Wan-Bissaka ranks among the top 10 players in Europe's top 5 leagues in terms of tackles, despite only actually having played 4 seasons of regular first-team football during those 5 years, and only actually having been involved in half of Manchester United's games last season. Whilst his tremendous tackling abilities earn him a spot in this 7, it is all of his other deficiencies that have seemingly made him surplus to requirements under Erik ten Hag at Old Trafford, with rumours abound that Manchester United would be willing to take a £30 to £40 million hit on Wan-Bissaka this summer. Given that they paid somewhere between £45 to £50 million for him, subject to add-ons, that would mean a price tag now of between £5 to £20 million. And for any non-possession-based, mid-table Premier League team, at least on reasonable wages, I still think that he could do an outstanding job. First, Dave Challange. Before Rory Delap, there was Dave Challange. Whilst his powers of hurling a ball deep into the 6-yard box never quite reached the dizzying heights of the Premier League, as Delap's did, hence why Delap's talents are far better known, and it does both players a disservice to talk about them solely in terms of their ability when lobbing a ball. Nonetheless, that is the entire premise and purpose of this video, so that is exactly what I'm going to do. Dave Challange discovered his powers of throwing a ball further than anyone else whilst he was still at school, and it was particularly effective in schoolboy football, where he could dart the ball straight in under the crossbar and just ask anyone to get a touch on it in order to score a goal. Later, Challange turned professional at Tranmere Rovers, and the club from Merseyside became synonymous for a number of years, just as Stoke City later would, playing under Tony Pulis, with incredibly dangerous long throws launched into the box. Challange, who still holds the record for the longest throw-in ever recorded, never had too many problems repeatedly lobbing the ball during his playing days, and maintained that it was all technique rather than strength that allowed him to get such remarkable distance on the ball. Unfortunately, after he retired, he did suffer from a series of back and shoulder problems which have required injections and operations, most likely due to all of those long throws. Age 46, Challange is now first-team boss at Stockport County, another of his former clubs, with whom he won the National League title last season, but he says that he has retired the long throw due to all of the injuries. That is it for my 7, but among a whole raft of shortlisted players that I had to leave out, some of the most notable honourable mentions include Graham Alexander's penalties, Stuart Elliott's leap and heading ability, Paul Robinson's foot like a traction engine that could clear an entire football pitch from a goal kick, Odion Igalo's fake shot that has fooled countless defenders over the years, and Rogerio Ceni's set pieces, along with Delap's throw and Brunt's corners that I left out for reasons outlined during the introduction. That is it for today's video. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know if that was the case, and hit the like button. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens as we close in on the milestone of 500,000 subscribers. And you can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so. Have a absolutely stonking day.